Resurrection. Most would be familiar with this term when it comes to the event of Jesus rising again from the dead 3 days after his crucifixion. What many are perhaps less familiar with is the hope of the final resurrection at the end of the age, the rising from the dead in preparation for either eternity with God in the new heavens and earth, or eternity without God in the second death. In a number of interactions in the Gospels, this resurrection hope is discussed, such as the time in John 11 when Martha responds to Jesus' comment that Lazarus would live again, saying, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Or when the Sadducees came to test Jesus about the Jewish laws on marriage. Luke 20:34-38 reads, Jesus replied, "The people of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy of taking part in the age to come and in the resurrection from the dead will neither marry nor be given in marriage, and they can no longer die, for they are like the angels. They are God's children, since they are children of the resurrection." But in the account of the burning bush, even Moses showed that the dead rise, for he calls the Lord the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living, for to him all are alive. We even see a precursor to the final resurrection in Matthew in chapter 27, verses 52 and 53, where it records that the bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. In John 5:28 and 29, we read Jesus himself saying, "A time is coming when all who are in the graves will hear his voice and come out. Those who have done what is good will rise to live, and those who have done what is evil will rise to be condemned." The apostles after Jesus go on to continue preaching this, such as is recorded by Luke in Acts chapter 24, verses 14 and 15, when Paul stands before the Roman leader Felix and proclaims, "I admit that I worship the God of our ancestors as a follower of the way, which they call a sect. I believe everything that is in accordance with the law and that is written in the prophets, and I have the same hope in God as these men themselves have, that there will be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked." And so, it would do well to look briefly at some of the more direct references about this final resurrection in the Old Testament that Paul and others speaking in the New Testament were drawing from. For example, in Job 14:14, we read, "If a man dies, shall he live again? All the days of my hard service I will wait till my change comes." And in 19:26, "And after my skin is destroyed, this I know, that in my flesh I shall see God." David says in Psalm 17, verse 15, "As for me, I will be vindicated and will see your face. When I awake, I will be satisfied with seeing your likeness." In Hosea 13:14, "I will deliver this people from the power of the grave. I will redeem them from death. Where, O death, are your plagues? Where, O grave, is your destruction?" The prophet Isaiah prophesies in chapter 26, verse 19, "Your dead shall live. Together with my dead body they shall arise. Awake and sing, you who dwell in the dust, for your dew is like the dew of herbs, and the earth shall cast out the dead." And then, perhaps the most direct mention comes in the revelation given to Daniel, chapter 12, verse 2. "Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt." At this point, it would do well to discuss why there needs to be a final resurrection and how this final resurrection is actually made possible. The answer to the why is simple: death. We all know to lesser or greater extents that death is horrific. It is the losing of something invaluable, the loss of a loved one who ceases from being part of our lives, our community. Why is there death? Some say that death is a necessary part of life, that it is normal. But if it is normal and necessary, why does it hurt so much? Why does it feel so wrong? According to Genesis, Adam and Eve were deceived by the serpent to disobey God. The consequence for this was what God had explicitly warned them against, and what Eve had repeated to the serpent, that in the day they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they would die. So from that point, the moment of the rebellion, sin entered the world, and God told them the curse that would now be upon them and all their descendants: death. saying in Genesis chapter 3 verse 19, "By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return." The grand overarching narrative of the Bible, however, is the hope of redemption from this curse, a looking forward to the day when all would be made right again, and pain, suffering, and death would be no more. Hence the revelations of the coming day when death would be overcome, with the rising of the dead, the final resurrection. As to how this is accomplished, the crucial event of Jesus' own resurrection must be explained. Paul puts it this way in his first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 15, verses 20 through 27a. "But Christ has indeed been raised from the dead, the firstfruits of those who have fallen asleep. For since death came through a man, the resurrection of the dead comes also through a man. For as in Adam all die, so in Christ all will be made alive. But each in turn, Christ the firstfruits, then, when he comes, those who belong to him. Then the end will come, when he hands over the kingdom to God the Father after he has destroyed all dominion, authority, and power. For he must reign until he has put all his enemies under his feet. The last enemy to be destroyed is death, for he has put everything under his feet." Jesus made a way for the final resurrection by, firstly, his incarnation, that is, his first becoming man. Adam, the first man, through his rebellion, brought sin and death into all humanity. Everyone inherited a sin nature and so sins, and so continues to remain under that curse of death. Jesus, however, was the first man to be tempted in all the same ways as any other human, yet never sin. And so his willing death satisfied the debt of sin, and therefore death could not hold him. God raised him from the dead. And as the divine Son of God, whose Spirit is sent from the Father after he ascended to heaven, all who receive him receive his sacrifice, the sacrifice accepted by God the Father, are no longer under the curse. At the end of the age, when the earth that was also cursed is redeemed, death itself will be no longer. And the same power that raised Christ from the dead will also raise all those who are in Christ. For those who are not in Christ, they will be resurrected to face a second death, an eternal death. Paul's reference to the first fruits in the passage itself, likely referring to the commandment given in Leviticus 23:10-14, serves as a helpful illustration. How the first ripe sheaf of grain was to be an offering to God, acknowledging that everything belongs to him, and was offered with expectation of the full harvest of grain that would follow. In other words, Jesus' first rising from the dead was that initial resurrection offering, which would signal the expectation for the full resurrection harvest to follow at the end of the age. If Christ does not return first, we all still have an appointment with death. But the hope for all those in Christ is that they will follow him, even in his resurrection, to new life with him in the new heavens and earth.